Good morning, all. Today I will be taking a seminar on pseudophakic cystoid macular edema. So, over 6 decades ago, in 1953, Irwin et al. Described pseudophakic cystoid macular edema, and that was in the era of intracapsular cataract extraction. And later, in 1966, Gass and Norton studied the angiographic pattern and the pseudophakic cystoid macular edema, or the PCME. It is well known in the name of Irwin and Gass as Irwin-Gass syndrome. So the surgical methods have improved over the years, decreasing the incidence of complication, but drastically and dramatically increase patients' expectations of successful surgical outcome. So PCME, it is one of the most common cause of less than expected postoperative visual outcomes. And even in this modern cataract surgery era, it continues to be existing about 2% in clinical scenario, and in fundus fluorescein angiography detection, it can be at least up to 30%. So coming to the incidence, so the clinically significant pseudophakic PCME, it was about 8% in the era of intracapsular cataract extraction, but it has considerably decreased in the phaco, and it has been reported to 0.1 to 2.35%. And even in flax, it has been reported 1.18%. And this is clinically significant PCME. And if we talk about fluorescein angiography incidence of detection of PCME, that is angiographic CME, that is defined as the presence of fluorescein leakage in FFA. It will be usually asymptomatic, and even in the absence of clinically evidence or the OCT evidence, fundus fluorescein angiography will demonstrate some signs of leakage. That is called as angiographic CME. That incidence is far more than that of clinically significant PCME. It can be up to 20 to 54%. So the pathophysiology of the PCME is considered to be multifactorial. The leading causes are inflammation and vitreous traction. So it is postulated that surgical manipulation within the anterior chamber may lead to the release of arachidonic acid from the uveal tissue. And this arachidonic acid can lead to the production of the inflammatory mediators such as leukotrienes or prostaglandins. Leukotrienes via lipooxygenase pathway and prostaglandins via the COX pathway. So these inflammatory mediators can diffuse posteriorly into the vitreous and disrupt the blood-retinal barrier, and this disruption results in increased permeability of the perifoveal capillaries and fluid accumulation within the retina. But the edema continues to be in the macula. That is by the absence of the blood vessels within the foveal avascular zone and the high metabolic activity of the fovea. This causes reduced fluid reabsorption within the macula, and the fluid continues to remain there. And integrity of the posterior lens capsule during the cataract extraction is one of the most predisposing factor in CME development. So the direct macular traction from prolapsed vitreous or an incarcerated iris or vitreous, it can be responsible for the development of CME, and the presence of fine strands of vitreous connecting the posterior vitreous face and the macular area support this theory. So there are many risk factors which causes an increased incidence of PCME. So most importantly, it is the age. So elderly will be more affected after cataract surgery, and systemic conditions such as diabetes, hypertension, and coexisting ocular conditions such as diabetic retinopathy or retinal vein occlusion, and the severity of PCME increases with the severity of diabetic retinopathy. The usage of prostaglandin analogs, presence of epiretinal membrane or any tractional maculopathy, this all can increase the incidence of PCME. And surgery associated is PC rent or vitreous loss, or a longer duration of the surgery, or high phaco energy that is used. So the UK pseudophakic macular edema study group, they have done a study on a large database of about 82,000 eyes, and they have found that baseline incidence of pseudophakic macular edema in eyes, even without any operative complications or any risk factors, was about 1.17%. So eyes which developed PCME without any operative complication was more likely to be males and older people. And the relative risk increased with the presence of the coexisting risk factors such as vitreous loss, which increased the risk to 2.61, a presence of epiretinal membrane, which is increased the risk up to 5.6, and retinal vein occlusion, a relative risk of 4.4. And eyes from patients with diabetes, even in the absence of retinopathy, shows an increased risk of PCME about 1.8. And the risk was even higher in the presence of any diabetic retinopathy, and this proportionally increased with the severity of diabetic retinopathy. So even in uneventful cataract surgery with an intact posterior capsule and no obvious epimacular pathology, this occurs. So there can be a structural abnormality of the retroiridal space, such as a capsular traction to the pars plicata and haptics in contact with the intermediate uvea in some location. Or these patients may have an underlying genetically determined immune variation that predisposes to inflammation. So coming to the diagnosis, clinically, how will we find? So the most frequent sign will be poor postoperative visual acuity, and one onset of this PCME is usually 4 to 12 weeks after the cataract extraction, and it reaches its peak at 4 to 6 weeks postoperatively. And patients typically complain of an impaired vision after an initial postoperative period of improvement. They may also complain of a reduced contrast sensitivity. And clinically, loss of or absence of foveal reflex will be the most common sign. And there can be intraretinal cystoid, which can be demonstrated in slit lamp biomicroscopy. So the acute PCME, it appears within 4 months of surgery, and late onset occurs after more than 4 months, and chronic means which lasts more than 6 months, and recurrent means after the subsidence it can again occur. So the imaging have expanded, and the terminologies also have been told. So currently the wide spread used tool to detect PCME is the optical coherence tomography. It is a non-invasive tool. So when there is a blood retinal barrier disruption, intraretinal cystoid hydration appears initially in the inner nuclear layer and then proceeds to the outer plexiform layer, and finally accumulation in the subretinal space. So for the concern of the juniors, so this is the normal spectral domain OCT that is found. So moving from the vitreous towards the outer layers of the globe, the SD-OCT detects the neurosensory retina resting between two layers of extreme hyperreflectivity. One is the RNFL and one is the RPE-Brooks complex. So just above the RPE-Brooks complex, it is the interdigitation zone. This whole area corresponds to the photoreceptors, that is cones and the rods. So just above that, this hyperreflectivity is the interdigitation zone. So this is the outer segment of the photoreceptors. And this hyperreflective is the myoid zone, that is the innermost segment of the photoreceptors. And this hyperreflective layer is the ellipsoid zone, that is the segment between the outer segment and the inner segment, or the ISOS junction, that is the ellipsoid zone. So in the pseudophakic macular edema, the edema or the intraretinal cyst first appears in the inner nuclear layer, that is this dark layer which is seen. And then it extends to the outer plexiform layer, or which is called as the Henle's layer. Then it sweeps under the neurosensory retina and occurs as a serous macular detachment. So this is a white on black image, and this is a black on white image. Just the contrast is changed just to enhance the visibility of the cystoid. So what we have to know is whether we are dealing with a PCME or it is a diabetic macular edema. So according to this study, what they have found is if it is a pseudophakic cystoid macular edema, there will be higher retinal volume ratio that is present at the fovea. And in DME, there is a high chance that the thickness can be increased in the parafoveal region rather than in the fovea. a thicker foveal inner nuclear layer and Henle's layer will be in pseudophakic cystoid macular edema, and there will be absence of ERM, and the presence of inner nuclear layer cyst alone will contribute to PCME, and the presence of SMD, which is detected in 70 to 100% of the PCME. And the presence of microaneurysms or hard exudate will go in favor of diabetic macular edema, and the presence of additional cyst in GCL or the RNFL goes in favor of diabetic macular edema. So the absence of subretinal fluid or the small SMD usually is suggestive of DME, even though in DME 15% of SMD has been reported. So how does this SRF occur? It is mainly because of the outer blood retina barrier breakdown and impaired function of the RPE. Another theory is that external limiting membrane dysfunction, that is promoting the diffusion of protein, inducing a positive oncotic pressure, may lead to SRF accumulation, and the traction of the Muller cells on the inner and outer segment foveal receptors also can lead to SRF development. So there is a basic difference between the DME and PCME pathophysiology. So in DME, it is a chronic hyperglycemia. It is associated with advanced glycation end products, activation of the polyol hexokinase pathway. This leads to gradual vascular changes such as breakdown of the cell-to-cell junction, pericyte loss, thickening of basement membrane, increased oxidative stress, and so on. So this is a gradual vascular change. Whereas in contrast, PCME, it is induced by an acute and local inflammatory reaction. So there will be acute breakdown of the blood retinal barrier, and there will be massive dysfunction of the RPE cell. This can lead to sudden onset of subretinal fluid. That is the difference between this small SMD in PCME and the diabetic macular edema. So one newer terminology is microcystic macular edema. That is the cystoid macular, the PCME, they have divided into two groups. That is the normal cystoid macular lesion, which occurs as the triple layer, that is inner nuclear, outer plexiform, and SMD, or it can be microcystic macular edema, that is the cyst that occurs only in the inner nuclear layer in the absence of outer plexiform morphology. So this microcystic macular edema, it has been described previously in cases of multiple sclerosis, neuromyelitis optica with optic neuritis and all. The presence of this microcystic macular edema or the MME, it was associated with a greater overall disability, disease severity in the multiple sclerosis, and reduced visual acuity, and occurred more commonly in eyes with prior optic neuritis. The cause is exactly not known. So this is the triple layer edema in PCME, and this is the MME, that is the inner nuclear cyst alone. So whereas in multiple sclerosis, this MME or the microcyst in the inner nuclear layer, on the due course, it will be associated with thinning of the RNFL or gross thinning of the inner nuclear layer. But in PCME, it is never seen. The retinal thickness will be preserved. That is about OCT. Coming to fluorescein angiography, it is highly valuable in diagnosing CME, especially in uncertain cases. So it usually presents in early phases capillary dilatation and leakage from the small perifoveal capillaries. And on the late phase, there will be pooling into the cystoid. That is in the outer plexiform layer, the dye will be continually going. That is pooling in the outer plexiform layer, resulting in the classic perifoveal petaloid staining pattern. And this looks like a flower petal, and this has been described as the chrysanthemum appearance or the petaloid staining pattern. And there will be late leakage and staining of the optic nerve head also. And what about octa in pseudophakic cystoid macular edema? So in the acute edematous phase, OCT angiography showed alteration in the deep capillary plexus and decrease in the vessel density in superficial and the deep capillary plexus. So the superficial capillary plexus, it occurs in the RNFL GCL, and the deep capillary plexus, it occurs in the inner nuclear and the outer plexiform layer. So this is the octa image and this shows the superficial capillary plexus. So this is the pre-treatment. post-treatment and in a control eye. So this row 1, it is an on-fast segmentation between the internal limiting membrane and the inner plexiform layer, and this showing the superficial capillary plexus, and you can see only 2 small cystoids, minor cystoid spaces. And this row 2, it is the superficial capillary plexus with an apparently normal pattern before treatment and after treatment comparable with the control. And this is the vessel density map, and this is the vessel density they have written, and compared to the control and the post treatment, vessel density is a little bit decreased, but it is completely reversible after the treatment. And this is a pseudophakic cystoid macular edema pre-treatment and post-treatment. So this is about the superficial capillary plexus, which is not much affected in PCME. And this is the deep capillary plexus. So you can see the on-fast segmentation between the inner and outer plexiform layer, showing the radial pattern of cystoid spaces and the resolution after treatment. So in row 2, deep capillary plexus can be seen as distended with dilated intercapillary spaces before treatment, and after treatment coming back to normalization. Some of the capillary vortexes remain a little bit extended, and this is the density map, and you can see a reduced density before treatment and coming back to normal after treatment, and this is the pre and post OCT. So the deep capillary plexus is considered to be more affected in OCT angiography in PCME. So why does that happen? Obviously, because in DCP, there is an inner nuclear and the outer plexiform layer. So this is more affected in PCME. So there will be compression of the capillaries by this edematous retinal tissue, and this causes a capillary reperfusion and the flow detection due to the changes in their spatial orientation. So rather than that of superficial capillary plexus, DCP is affected in PCME. So coming to management, most cases of PCME resolve spontaneously. So the available therapeutic interventions, both for prophylaxis and for treatment of CME, are based on the theories regarding the pathogenesis. There is no widely accepted treatment algorithm, and all treatment strategy aim to decrease the macular edema and thereby increasing the visual acuity. So topical corticosteroids and topical NSAIDs are the commonly used first line treatment approach. And when this approach is ineffective, the other treatment options can be classified and can be tried. And in eyes with chronic PCME and vitreomacular traction, the last resort, pars plana vitrectomy, can be tried. And the topical NSAID, it works by inhibiting the COX enzymes, and they have anti-inflammatory activity independent of their inhibition of the COX enzyme. And the main advantage of our topical corticosteroid is that good intraocular pressure control, reduce risk of secondary infection, and additional analgesic effect. So the commonly used can be Nepafinac, Ketorolac, and Bromfenac. And topical corticosteroids are commonly used in as a treatment. So the lipophilic acetate suspension of prednisolone penetrate the intact corneal epithelium and reach the anterior chamber in higher concentration rather than that of water-soluble forms such as dexamethasone. And the potential complications can be glaucoma, exacerbation of infection, and corneal issues. So there have been multiple studies which are saying one will be better than this, one will be better than that, the combination therapy is better. I'll be showing you a few studies. So this was one study, Ketorolac versus prednisolone versus combination therapy in the treatment of acute PCME. So what they have found is the patients treated with combination therapy or Ketorolac monotherapy responded more quickly than the patients did treatment with topical prednisolone alone. But in all the three categories, patient experienced recovery of 2 lines or more of visual acuity. And this was another journal, Incidence of Visually Significant PCME after Uneventful phacoemulsification in Patients, and they treated with Nepafinac. So the patients treated with topical prednisolone alone had a higher incidence of visually significant PCME after an uneventful cataract surgery than those treated with topical prednisolone and nepafinac. Here also they showed the combination therapy was better. And this was another journal published in Retina, topical nepafinac as an alternate treatment for CME in steroid responsive patient. So in this study, they found out that nepafinac alone was an effective and safe therapy for treating even chronic cystoid macular edema who are steroid responders. And this is a systematic review and network meta-analysis they have done. A total of 19 trials using 7234 patients were taken. And they found out that topical NSAIDs are effective drugs compared to placebos for the relief of anterior segment chamber inflammation. And diclofenac was most likely to improve anterior chamber inflammation after cataract surgery, followed by nepafinac, ketorolac, bromfenac, and flurbiprofen. And nepafinac was most likely to improve post-ocular pain relief, followed by bromfenac and ketorolac. So the other option which can be tried is periocular steroids, the posterior subtenon injection. It exerts a maximal and long-lasting response, but there is an inverted risk of penetration of the globe and a higher chance of steroid-induced glaucoma, hypersensitivity to the components of injected steroid preparation, and it can activate necrotizing scleritis or ocular toxoplasmosis. And in the refractory cases, intravitreal steroids can be tried, and transient IOP rise can be there. And the other option is intravitreal steroid implant or the dexamethasone. So this is a biocompatible intravitreal implant named as Osudex, and it is a slowly releasing 0.7 mg. Over up to 4 months, we can get the result. And there will be transient IOP rise, but it is relatively infrequent. And this study had compared dexamethasone intravitreal implant with conventional triamcinolone patient, and they have found out that macular edema seems to respond more rapidly with intravitreal triamcinolone, and 3-monthly repetitive injection maintained the reduction in the retinal thickness rather than that of a single dexamethasone implant at the first 6 months follow-up period. So this study favored towards the intravitreal triamcinolone repetitive injection. And intravitreal anti-VEGF also has been tried. So VEGF, it is a key mediator of angiogenesis, but it also plays an important role in the inflammation and capillary permeability. So in refractory cases, anti-VEGF therapy has also been used. Intravitreal bevacizumab, ranibizumab, aflibercept, all has been used and all has been proven increasing the visual acuity and decreasing the pseudophakic cystoid macular edema, the recalcitrant cases. Even intravitreal infliximab, it is a monoclonal antibody against the tumor necrosis factor alpha. This also has been found beneficial in the treatment of refractory pseudophakic macular edema. So there is no proper guideline of treatment. So the AAO, it has come up with the selected citation according to the level of scientific evidence, and the findings of this analysis were NSAID therapy is effective in reducing PCME detected by angiography or OCT. It accelerates visual recovery after surgery when compared directly with placebo or topical corticosteroid formulation. The use of NSAID does not alter the long-term visual outcome, and there is no evidence that a benefit of NSAID therapy could not be obtained with an equivalent dosing of a corticosteroid. However, it doesn't support a synergistic effect using both an NSAID and a corticosteroid. So in our institution, how do we treat if we get a case of pseudophakic cystoid macular edema? So the first, if there is an appearance of the triple layer therapy, and we will initially try with topical NSAIDs, and we can gradually monitor with OCT, 1 month OCT, and if it is reducing, usually the PCME will reduce on its own. So the problem occurs once it is not reducing after the 1 month or 6 weeks follow-up OCT, if it is not reducing or it is increasing. So we have to confirm the diagnosis, whether we are dealing with the PCME or it is something else, especially if the patient is a diabetic. So we will proceed with the digital fluorescein angiography, confirm the diagnosis, and proceed accordingly. I'll be dealing with data. So how can you prevent? So the pseudophakic cystoid macular edema, it can't be prevented, but there has been studies that topical nepafinac 0.3%, it reduces PCME in patients with pre-operative risk factors. That is, if there is any presence of diabetes, diabetic macular edema, ERM, or elderly people. So a pre-op topical nepafinac can be tried, and that has shown reduction in PCME, but it did not show any benefit in patients without preoperative risk factors. And another thing they have mentioned is the dropless cataract surgery, which involves the intravitreal injection of single-use compounded combination of antibiotics and corticosteroids. So this has been described as a single vial of Trimoxy, 0.3 mg triamcinolone and 0.2 mg moxifloxacin is injected transzonularly into the anterior vitreous of the patient just before removing the viscoelastic material. So the problem with this is that the wow effect of the cataract surgery won't be there. That is, initial post-operative foggy vision will be there because of the triamcinolone, and there is an unclear risk of steroid-induced ocular hypertension, lens instability. But this has shown decreased incidence of PCME, but statistically not so significant. And this is mainly to comply with the post-cataract surgery drop regimen, which can be challenging. So the poor compliance patient, but it is not commonly practiced. So I'll be dealing with, discussing a few cases. So this was a 60-year-old female, diabetic, who came with defective vision in the left eye. And it showed presence of a few microaneurysm, hard exudate in the posterior pole, and few dot and blot hemorrhages, and these are features of non-proliferative diabetic retinopathy. And when the OCT was done, both eye, it showed a near normal OCT thickness of 305, and the patient underwent left eye cataract surgery. So after the cataract surgery in the left eye, this was some 2 months after follow-up, and you can see there is mass in the left eye, there is massive increase in the central macular thickness. It is about 729, which has increased from the central 305. And here, if you see, it is not typical that of the PCME that I have described. There is a large central cystoid with the presence of hard exudates and microaneurysms, and there are presence of inner nuclear and outer plexiform layer. So this doesn't fit to the criteria of pseudophakic cystoid macular edema. So we proceeded with the fundus fluorescein angiography. So the fundus fluorescein angiography in early phase, it is showing multiple pinpoint hyperfluorescence in and around the perifoveal region. So this is the early, mid, and late phase. So you can see the multiple pinpoint hyperfluorescence, which is increasing in intensity and size with the diffuse fussiness in the late phase. So this is not comparable to the pseudophakic cystoid macular edema, which I have explained. So for the sake of juniors, I will explain once more. So this is the diabetic macular edema in fundus fluorescein angiography. So you can see this multiple pinpoint hyperfluorescence, which is increasing in intensity with fussiness of the margin, suggestive of a leaking microaneurysm. And this is the pseudophakic cystoid macular edema appearance. So you can see there are no microaneurysms, and there is pooling into the outer plexiform layer or the cystoid, which causing a petaloid or the chrysanthemum appearance with the late staining and the leakage from the disc. So this is the characteristic appearance in DME, and this is the characteristic appearance in PCME. So you have to be careful whether you are dealing with the PCME or the diabetic macular edema. So this was another case, a 55-year-old male who came for a right eye cataract surgery, and the post cataract surgery 1 month he was complaining of a diminution of vision, and the OCT showed the characteristic triple layer edema, inner nuclear, outer plexiform, and SMD with the rise in the macular thickness, central macular thickness. So this is for academic purpose, and this patient showed typical features of a pseudophakic cystoid macular edema, that is early capillary leakage, pooling into the outer plexiform layer with late staining and small leakage from the optic disc. So this patient has been treated with topical NSAIDs. So this is the 1 month BCVA. It has been responded gradually from 560 to 490. So this thickness change you can see in this diagram. So this whole green and white means that much area the edema has decreased. So whatever we see in red will be increase in edema, green and white will be massive reduction in the CME. So this is the 3 month. You can see the whole cystoid have resolved, and BCVA has responded, have come back to 6, and 6. So the pseudophakic cystoid macular edema, it is the most common cause of less than expected postoperative visual outcome. Even in uncomplicated cataract surgery without any risk factor, the incidence remains about 1.7%. The first line of treatment will be topical NSAIDs or topical corticosteroids. And in case of resistant CME, periocular or intraocular corticosteroids can be given. And anti-VEGF, it is experimental, it can be considered. Surgical option should be reserved for the special indication. So in any case of non-responding cases, fundus fluorescein angiography should be performed, and it may suggest worsening of a pre-existing DME, which changes the therapeutic approach. Thank you.